Hello, everybody. Welcome to Fed Trends. Now, we're going to talk real quickly this week about the CIOSP4 situation with all the protests that have happened. And we were able to get a hold of Gus the RFP Groundhog so that we could get a new date for everybody on when CIOSP4 will actually be usable. So first, let's start with what's kind of where we are to date. Now, there were 98 protests at one point of the CIOSP4 scoring. So everybody got to submit on this $5 billion multiple award contract and say, I got 8,000 points, or I got 9,000 points, or however many that they totaled up to. Now, there were protests, there were 98 of them. There were various corrections made, and NITAC, the procuring organization, went ahead and pushed out preliminary award announcements. Now, there were 28 more protests. Now, the good news is for the government, that's moving the right direction. So you've got fewer protesters, which means you've shored up some things. Now, NITAC, on July 11th, NITAC pushed out a note to all offerers talking about what had happened and what actions they were going to take. Now, the protest fell into easy to solve and harder to solve. Now, the easy to solve, there was one company called Sky Solutions. Their protest is still sealed at GAO, so you can't read the details of it. But the response from NITAC was they're going to look into their score. So here's what I think that meant. I think Sky Solutions probably thinks they should have gotten some points given to them that they were taking credit for that maybe NITAC took away from them. So that's easy. That's an easy one to knock off. Here's the difficult one. The other parts of the letter that NITAC sent out said that they're going to have to, quote, hard validate all the scores. Here's what that meant. The way the scoring went was, if I said I had 5,000 points, you just took my word for it. They really only validated you, based on my understanding, they only validated your points if you were going to move on to be an awardee. So if you said that you were below the number of points or below the cut line, they kind of didn't bother, which I understand. I follow that logic. I mean, that's saying if you were selecting somebody to win a competition, if somebody's not in a competitive range, you don't really go through and fully score their submission. I understand that. Now, here's the interesting area where GAO found that was a problem. That means that the cut line that was established for each socioeconomic category was based in part on unvalidated numbers. So if to use round numbers, let's say that the cut line should have been 8,000 points. Well, if some of the people that bid that were in the upper 7,000s that weren't going to make the cut, if their scores weren't validated and they should have been lower, then maybe the cut line shouldn't have been 8,000. Maybe it should have been 7,500 if whatever formula was being used to generate that was kind of taking all of the math into consideration. So here's why that's difficult. The level of effort, just the pure manual labor of going through and hard validating every score. Did every past performance that was used, was it compliant? Was it allowed to be used? Do we think it counts? That's going to take a really long time. And the reason the government has everybody self-validate in the first point is because there's so much work in validating all of that. Why not just let everybody else kind of come up with the rough draft score and then you only validate the last few? So the government said they're going to hard validate all the scores. They are then going to reassess the cut lines and then re-rank everybody. So along with that, they've extended CIOSP3 to April the 29th of 2024. So what happens from here? Now look, I can give you a few of my thoughts. I mean, I think that one of the things that we might see is that the next round of awards, if they end up with just a couple of protests, they might decide to just go ahead and let those couple of companies through. I've seen that a lot of times. If you go back to the old GSA fast contract days, there was a how the heck do we differentiate between number 35 and number 37 on this list? Let's just give it to everybody. And 94 companies, I think it was, won that because they just couldn't differentiate. So maybe they open the aperture a little bit more, and if you get a few straggling protesters in this next round of awards, maybe they expand the awardee list a little bit. But I was able to get a hold of Gus the Groundhog. Turns out that, I thought he had a cell phone, and they don't have cell phone coverage up in Pocahontas County, West Virginia. So it turns out he has to go all the way down to a payphone at a gas station. So no wonder it was hard to get a hold of him. But here's what he said. He thinks that it's going to take July, August, and September to hard validate all the scores. They're going to have to ramp up labor and find every available person to throw at that effort. Then he thinks that you're going to see another preliminary award document around October, which would give an opportunity to see if there's going to be any additional protests and give the government some time to adjudicate and maybe make one last round of changes based on whatever those protests are. And he thinks that you're probably going to start to get kind of thin on protest foundations, because there's been so many of them now that surely the government's been able to address most of what has been brought up. So a lesser number of protests, maybe in the November time period, but you're probably looking at least January before you see an actual real CIOSP4 vehicle that would be awarded. Now, we'll see if he's accurate. The last time we talked to him, he said there's no way there was going to be a live CIOSP4 contract before June, and it's July, and we don't have one. So I'd say he was right the first time, and, he does the best he can for a groundhog that lives next to a national radio observatory and monitors government procurement news. So we got to give him a little bit of slack. I mean, we'll see what happens on this one, but I've been talking to him a little bit about the FBI ITSSS procurement, and, well, we'll see if we can get some of his thoughts on that coming up soon. That's kind of the recap of where we are on CIOSP4. Everybody, have a great rest of your week. Thanks for watching.